Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fractures Collaborators chat. My name is Frank Horvat. I am a composer based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and it's a really pleasure to bring to you tonight a little discussion amongst fellow creators, people that came together from all walks of life, from different places, to create a new song cycle called Fractures. A song cycle based on the detrimental impact of hydraulic fracking. So for all of you who are joining us tonight, we have people joining us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on X, formerly known as Twitter, YouTube, of course. So welcome all. I want to get started by introducing our panelists this evening. First up, my very, very good friend, renowned Canadian vocalist, soprano, Meredith Hall. Welcome, Meredith.
Hi. Hello, Frank.
It's so nice to have Meredith with us, who of course was my collaborator on this project for many years to bring these 13 songs to life. Our next guest is a poet, a writer, a teacher, an environmentalist. Please welcome from the state of Pennsylvania, Lilith Mellon Guignard. Lilith, welcome.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And now, a person who's not that far away from us in upstate New York, I believe, or I believe he's in upstate New York. He can correct me if I'm wrong here. I believe he is. Poet, author, writer, high school science teacher, Wayne Meneke. Wayne, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Frank and Meredith. Actually, I'm on Long Island.
So you are near New York City. Yes.
Yes, I am.
Excellent. And last but not least, our next guest is based in the beautiful state of Vermont in the eastern United States, northeastern United States, poet, writer, environmental scientist, I should say. This is Mary Heather Noble. Mary, hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it's lovely to have all of you. So just to let anybody watching know, you are welcome to ask questions at any point. We are going to have a conversation about the amazing text and the songs that were created out of the text of these three wonderful writers. And we'd love to hear from you as well as the conversation goes along. So without further ado, let's just jump in. And I guess just a general question to all of you. I think when we were just coming on, we were talking about how this project literally was almost like years in the making. It felt like it was years in the making. And Wayne, I think we touched base like many years ago about this. Willis, maybe not so many years ago. And I just want you to get your initial thoughts about the fact that your words are out there in the form of music now. What do you think about that?
Well, my initial reaction was, rarely do I hear my own poetry read by anybody other than myself, and I know the cadence of the poem and where to pause and how it should sound coming out of my own voice. And then suddenly I heard Meredith and this music behind it, and it brought an entirely new element of emotion to it. There were notes in places and pauses in places and emphasis on certain words in places where it was unexpected. And I think it makes it more powerful. It makes you kind of sit up and pay attention. And I was floored hearing my words coming out of somebody else's mouth, but sung and put to music was mind-blowing.
Yeah, it was really exciting. yeah, I mean, just in general, it's always exciting. You're like, someone read my work, woohoo! And I mean, this poem is just one too that has gotten like the most play out there, partially because of the topic, but for whatever reason. But I mean, I'm not a professional at all, but I grew up in church choirs. I've done a lot of choral singing. You know, I did voice lessons back in college when we were singing art songs. And so I was really excited and gung-ho, but I've also heard some really bad versions of poems put to music. So I know it's not easy and it's not automatic, but these are fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say, I mean, first of all, I guess I'm just in love with the idea of creative collaboration and kind of that cross-pollination that can happen. I've had the pleasure of having a visual artist create the visual work to correspond with an essay of mine, and that was just, I mean, it adds a layer of complexity and interpretation that I think enriches the original, you know, derivative work. I think it just has an enriching aspect to it. And this is no different. And it's interesting, when I first listened to Meredith Singh, Seduction, there was a playfulness to it that that hadn't occurred to me, I guess, that was just a very welcome and interesting, you know, additional layer to add to the scene, I guess. And I think when I was writing it, I was really kind of focused myself on the sort of ominous nature of it. And so it just is, I just really, I'm just in love with the idea of this kind of collaboration. I think it just generates just a more enriched experience.
And it's born of a collaboration, which is what the Fracture Anthology was in the first place. And so it's interesting that, you know, one collaboration led to another collaboration. Both, so I feel, very unexpectedly happened.
My poem wasn't in that anthology. I found out about it late because I was just like, what? But so I'm just absolutely grateful that you stumbled upon it.
I went looking for it, Lilith. I went looking for mom poems. And I was so thrilled, you know, because I loved the poems that Frank brought to me from the Fractures anthology, but I could feel that for me to have breadth of character that I felt confident about, I had to be able to ground a portion of the cycle in women's voices. And so when I found, I mean, Seduction was right off the bat. I read that and I'm like, Frank, that is so great. I would like, can you find me 3 more from her? Because at that time I was thinking, you know, I want stuff that it really reflects. And he's like, no, Meredith, we have to have contrast. We have to have lots of variety. I'm really trying to get across so many different perspectives. But I was so glad when I found your piece, and I also found, I think I found Michelle's piece,
You did.
Daughter, and those put together with Seduction and others of the pieces that were maybe more neutral, but I could see them in a woman's voice. That really helped me. And it was funny, Wayne, because I pushed back against Agland.
I fought for you, Wayne. I fought for you.
Not because I didn't love the poem. I thought the poem was amazing. I couldn't see how I was going to do it.
Right. Well, actually, this is a good time, because if we're going to talk about Agland, Wayne, talk about Agland for us. What motivated you to write this poem? What's the background of it? What inspired it?
So prior to the pandemic, for many years, I had been working in the summer out in North Dakota and Montana with a paleontological group of scientists and teachers who got together and would spend a few weeks digging for dinosaurs, bring them back to the lab, in a little town called Marmarth, North Dakota, and clean them up, assemble them, catalog them, store them. And it is one of those towns, it's a one bar town. It is it's very small. And everybody seems to know everybody there. And we, the bone diggers, are outsiders. And there's a strange confluence of people in this town, because you have us from all over the United States and other countries as well, would descend on this town for a few weeks every summer, use that as our home base, and then go out digging dinosaurs. And at night, we would all congregate at the only bar that was around for probably 20 to 30 miles. And the locals were there, and they did not really, mingle with us. We kind of kept our distance as well, out of respect. But there were also, because at the time, fracking was really taking off, and there was Williston was a town that was a few miles away. But you would get some of the oil rig guys that would come down and spend some time and hang out at the bar. And this one day, I'm sitting at the bar, and I'm a couple of seats over from a gentleman at the end, and he was alone, and he was not moving. He was not talking to anyone. He was just kind of staring into his drink. And you can kind of feel just emanating off of this guy, the fact that he had been working probably for 24, 48 hours, however long their shifts are. You could sense the coldness. There was a smell, an earthy smell. There was a very distinct aura about this guy. And you didn't want to mess with him. You didn't want to engage with him. And I don't know if anybody else noticed him, but it struck me. And in doing all of this dinosaur work, I kept a journal, and just what I did every day, because that's what you do when you're doing science. You write down what you do. And, it's got a lot of notes about, field notes, and, what dinosaur we found and how many meters away it was from something else. But it also was my own personal feelings about what I saw all day, even at the bar. And I used that for writing. And the idea was I would put together a collection of poetry, a chapbook, and try to put it out there. And I probably came up with about 30 poems just from all these experiences. And this was one of them. And not all of them are about fracking or about guys that are working on the oil rig, but this one was. And this one, I guess, fit what they were looking for the Fracture anthology. And so when it came time to submit a few poems, I submitted 5, and 4 of them were taken for the anthology. That was one of them. I enjoyed writing that. I don't always write about people specifically like that. And everything just kind of clicked with that. So that was the genesis, I guess, of that poem.
Well, thank you.
I don't know if that changes Meredith's viewpoint now on that, but
No, not really. Actually, it definitely enriches it, because I love that you brought the sensory element in, and that you kind of populated the rest of the bar for me. I had never pictured the crowd from Shift same bar as the Gentleman Roughneck, and that to me is really cool. Because I was taken by the contrast of those two different portraits, and so I really I loved getting Shift in there, but my fear was that I somehow would not be able to convey respect, attraction, and at the same time, the ambivalence Like it was very complex, all of the emotions in the poem. And I was afraid that it would come off surface just as being in a woman's voice, as being a kind of a sexual description or something, like someone you were attracted to because of that macho element. So I felt like, Frank surprised me with every single song. The things he came up with, I never, ever could have imagined in my life as the setting for the poem. And yet every time, they were so much better than anything I would have imagined, and richer. So anyway, I really, I have family that work in the oil fields, that not anymore, but did. I come from Newfoundland. I don't know if that means anything to you, but we were a very fisheries-based province. The fishery broke, and a huge portion of the population ended up in Alberta working in the oil fields. So it was really important to me not to be disrespectful. And I felt there was great admiration in the poem. I just was afraid maybe a girly voice, especially starting with the gentleman roughneck at the bar, would come across wrong. But I was really happy in the end.
Yeah, you pulled it off and then some. And you're right. There is a sense of kind of desperation in that poem with his existence that you pull through perfectly. And I think if I remember correctly, in listening to it, there's some toward the end, like the last stanza, you injected some repetitiveness to the lines. You repeated a few lines in ways that I did not, and that I think adds to the element that I'm trying to convey just in the poem. That you changed that by enhancing it there. Yeah, well, it was well done.
Well, thanks. Yeah, actually, this may be a good time. So in case people are wondering, what are we talking about? What does this sound like? Why don't we play a little clip of the song for everyone to listen to?
A gentleman roughneck seated at the bar wears crude oil under his cuticles, and after days of throwing tongues, tool pushing deep discoveries from beneath the North Dakota wheat, finally wraps himself around a cold Coors Light. A cold Coors Light.
There we go. That's Agland. That's track 7 from the album Fractures and the song Cycle Fractures. That's Meredith Hall, soprano singing, Bram Goldhammer, pianist. That was recorded earlier this spring at Humbercrest United Church here in Toronto with my good friend Dennis Patterson as a recording engineer. So when I listen to that now, it reminds me a lot of the conversations that Meredith and I were having when we were going to sort of set up a game plan of what we wanted this song to convey, Wayne. And one of the things, like Meredith's right, the initial thought was this was going to be some kind of a flirtatious, ironically, like Mary Heather, your song is called Seduction, but this was supposed to be our seduction song. There was something alluring about this gentleman roughneck sitting at the bar. But the more we dove into that and realized that perhaps that was a little bit too one-dimensional, we had really discussed a lot the idea of the fact that this is a complicated human being. And because he's a complicated human being, and he's there's something alluring because he's mysterious and rough around the edges, but there's also this feeling that there's a lot of perhaps desperation or feeling of helplessness. And that's why when I wrote the song, you hear the rhythm of the piano is constantly unsettled. Sometimes it's swingy like a jazz song, da, 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 a little bit flirtatious. But then after that, with the North Dakota week. So all these little tricks I tried to do to make it a little bit ambiguous so we can understand the complexity of this person. So
I'm glad that you made the decision that you did, because I think it plays truer to what I saw, and fits more of the scenario in that bar. That is not a bar where people are trying to meet up for a rendezvous at all. This is a different kind of bar altogether. And everybody there is a character, and if I think back on it, if I had paid better attention, I probably could have gotten a different poem out of every person that was there.
Yeah, we're gonna move on. Let's move on to Lullaby in Fracktown, which actually appears just before Agland. So Lilith, tell us, you're actually one of we were discussing most of the poems or texts for the Fracture song cycle came from the Fracture anthology. This is where we started, but yours wasn't. So tell us. I think we just came across you in doing a search online, and lo and behold, thank you, internet and technology.
Thank you, Poetry Foundation. So they have, of course, they're one of the places where you can find a lot of good poetry collected, and then if they publish it, they make it really easily accessible. So it's a wonderful thing they do for folks. And
so what's just wondering, like what motivated Lullaby in Fracktown? Is it have to do with where you live, the area in which you live?
Where I live, and the fact that I had young kids at the time too. So I mean, I remember very clearly, for 5 years we lived, and it was 2010 to 2015, which was the height of fracking here in north central Pennsylvania, in Tioga County. And where, we just didn't know if this whole place that we loved was just going to go down the tubes and we were going to have to leave, my husband and me, because of the life we want and everything. But we're not from here, clearly. And just that day, a landman had come to the front door because we were had bought this place. They thought, oh, now's our chance to get these 7 acres, and I played dumb because I wanted to see his spiel, right? And I was doing the whole, I can't say anything without my husband, which is just not me at all. But anyway, it was useful. And I was thinking about that evening when my husband was actually gone, but I had my little kids, I don't know, let's say they were 3 and 5. And we were eating, because it was summer, on the front porch. So we see all the views, and, I know which direction, in 3 directions, they were flaming off methane. So, and we're sitting there, and just one of the kids had blue shoes, and it was probably my son. He was the older one. And he said, when I'm sad, I wear my blue shoes, because he loved language and he was getting all happy. And it just went around my head. And of course, my kids we weren't dealing with that. We didn't have to do that. But I'd been wrestling and writing other poems from my perspective. And for whatever reason, it threw me into, so Lullaby in Fracktown on the page is a villanelle, which is a form. And it's a form where 2 lines get repeated in different ways throughout. And then there's certain rhymes that you have to follow. So it allows for a lot of wordplay, but you get led by those kinds of first choices. And so I just started hearing a generic voice, but of someone who lived there, who was having to make these choices, well, I love this place, but I'm going to choose to believe that this is a good thing, that my husband works in the gas fields, that these people have come in and kind of taken over. And so, child, when you're sad, put on your blue shoes. And then the other line that gets repeated is, daddy's got a job to lose. And it
I think I repeated that a lot, didn't I? That you didn't have that repeating so much. That was so poignant to me. I had to keep bringing that back as the end
It
of a
repeats
verse.
in every stanza.
Oh, it is.
No,
You
no,
did
it's
have it.
every other stanza, and then they're both in the end. Sorry,
Right.
but that's, and you might have repeated it more. I mean, the liberties you took were absolutely right, and you were allowed, because you didn't have to stay in the villanelle, to explore some of that. And I loved how you did it.
Thank you.
Because because we'd started off with my sons talking, I just let some of the rhymes, lead me to very kind of, I don't know if it was Dr. Seussish, but
Yeah.
just language like that doesn't make literal sense, but it made emotional sense, and the visions of which were kind of horrific, and some of Dr. Seuss's are,
Yeah.
bright colors, friendly, but also about war or something.
Right.
So,
Meredith,
the
Meredith,
kangaroos, the dolphins flip flop. I just imagined dolphins beached,
Sure.
and things like that. And you did amazing things with that part. And Meredith, when you were asking me what I was thinking, and then and I was like, well, there's all the different emotions. And I just thought you brought that in really well.
Meredith, let's just hold your thought there. I know you want to jump in, but let's play a little bit of a clip. And when we come back from the clip, Meredith, maybe you can talk about why this poem resonated with you, and talk more about how your conversations with Lilith helped as we were working on it. But let's listen to the clip.
When you're sad, put on your blue shoes. You know that Mama loves you, lollipops, and Daddy still has a job to lose. So put on a party hat and play the kazoos, louder from the mountaintop, and dance the polka with pink kangaroos, dolphin choir singing.
There we go. Flip flop is next.
Oh, I guess what I responded to immediately was the scene of the mother singing to that kid who won't go to sleep, or who, the ritual of the putting the kids to bed with the singing or the stories or the little fun playtime, and often all of those things on repeat until they actually do go to sleep. And then the idea of all that happening in this, Frank's music has these sweet halos around. Each bar is like a little perfect halo moment in parts of the song. And to me, it's like, that's the comfort, the sweetness of the home, and that little safe world inside this other world, which wasn't safe, or certainly I felt that there was ambivalence coming, not ambivalence, but just some kind of distress underlying the mom's voice. And that it had to do with the maybe slight denial. Okay, it's all okay because it's great. We have a great job. Yes, it's loud. Yes, you can maybe smell and hear and see the evidence of the fracking around you, but we've got this now, and we're earning money now, and you're going to go to college, and we've got these blue shoes. We've got all these things that make us safe. And so just trying to feel like the mother really does have the true enjoyment of all of that, at the same time as there's this bubbling insecurity underneath it. And then when we talked about, you told me that the vision, the gray bird was the mourning dove. that literally the mother is like the mourning dove cooing to her child. So that to me was really powerful, and I just appreciated you so wrote back to me. I sent Lilith a bunch of questions, and you wrote back with such length and so clearly, and it really helped. And when you talked about the dead fish sound of the flip flop, flip flop, flip flop, that was really cool, as well as the childish element of it. That was yeah, it just made it all so rich for me.
Well, you asked great questions. So, I mean, and it was just what Wayne said. I mean, you just dove in. You didn't want things simple, and that was a huge gift.
I don't want anything simple ever. It's the bane of my existence.
Well, this was a
Like stuff.
I mean, Lilith, your text was really interesting because this is probably one of the songs on the album which has the most twists and turns. Like we didn't play it in this clip, but the end is extremely dark, and it gets very, very dark when you write "waste trucks clatter as the great food." I mean, flames pour forth. It becomes like epic and like apocalyptic.
Yeah.
To have these crazy twists and turns really reflects what the chaos of this whole situation is for landowners, for communities, for etc. I think that's why. And then of course this whole idea of like it's such a universal thing. I know a lot of you are parents and that type of thing. You know, what's your first thing? I want to protect my child, right? I want things to be okay. And that's for me the big poignant thing is trying to make we're going to survive, but there's a vulnerability there as they say that. I mean, that's why that line is definitely my most powerful lines that stick with me, that daddy still has a job to lose, and repeat it over and over again. So and it was interesting, Lilith, you mentioned the fact that this whole idea about this poem grew from the big oil coming and knocking on the door and trying to make the sweet deal, and that of course
big gas, but yes,
big gas in your case. Yeah, well, we call it big oil, anything related to oil and gas here. That's just our nickname for it. But this is a great segue, Mary Heather, for your contribution to the project, the seduction, which is completely about the big cell, right?
Yeah. It's so first of all, I'm an environmental scientist by training, and I spent the first part of my professional life kind of working as an environmental regulator. So first just regulating wastewater discharges, and then overseeing the investigation and remediation of contaminated sites. So I come to fracking with a very sort of scientific perspective, and my former work. I had, the unfortunate opportunity to sort of see firsthand what happens when a family's well becomes contaminated, and kind of what systems need to be in place to get people access to just the most fundamental of human needs when contamination threatens or ruins their source of clean drinking water. I've stood in people's kitchens, running their kitchen sink, sample water, and trying to awkwardly make small talk while we wonder, what they've been drinking. And I can remember when I was pregnant with my first daughter, being at a site, and in this case, it was a dry cleaning plume. But being pregnant and sampling somebody's well, and in this case, it was we were sampling a well that had a treatment system on it, and this was maintenance sampling to make sure the treatment system was working. But just that very human feeling of being in this person's home where their water's been impacted, and they're offering me cookies because I'm a guest in their home, and I'm pregnant and I'm dying for a cookie, but I know I'll be thirsty afterwards and I don't want to drink the water. And it's just a very intimate space to be in. a lot of times people, they feel violated, and even more so when the contamination is a result of activity that promise prosperity. So I've seen what that's like. And so when I wrote Seduction, it was right after I'd watched, I think it was the 2010 Gasland documentary. And I remember watching it and seeing moments where sort of the gas man, that the company rep comes to, try to entice people to lease their land for natural gas exploration. And for many folks, particularly in rural communities, these are folks for whom thousands of dollars makes a world of difference in their daily existence. And so it's really tempting to take an offer if you're unaware of the risks. And of course, in many cases, landowners are never really fully informed of the full spectrum of risks. And so for me, there's this doubt about whether the consent they give is legitimate. So when I wrote this piece, I was thinking a lot about consent and a lot about deceit. And I could sort of see this parallel between a scene in a living room with a naive landowner and a savvy oil and gas salesman, and a scene in a living room with a young girl bringing home a sort of shifty older guy to meet her parents for the first time. And, in both, there's kind of this politeness, this flirting, this flattery. But then, what happens after the parents have gone to bed? And what happens when you've signed your rights away?
Yeah.
And I guess when I was writing it, I wanted to sort of suggest and hint at the things that really aren't part of that conversation, kind of the depth of harm and the innocence lost, and particularly in this case, like just that blurred line between having regret and actually being violated. So that's kind of the perspective I was bringing to the piece.
Oh, that's wonderful. Could you talk a little bit about your writing style? Because I came upon your text originally because it was in the Fracture anthology, which was filled primarily with poetry. Am I safe to say this is, of course, not a work of poetry? It's
Right.
a bit like a mini essay in a way,
Right.
or a little plot synopsis or something. Like, talk about the writing style, because that was something that Meredith and I talked a lot about. How are we, we're usually used to working with poetry to make music
Right.
out of poetry, but we managed to do, make a song out of this thing which wasn't poetry. So talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
I mean, I would call this more of kind of a short nonfiction piece, or it. And actually, at the time I'd written it, there was a lot of creative nonfiction writers were dabbling in the short form, which is kind of like, it's like, this act of compressing something so that it has the powerful effect and the sting of like a snowball packed tightly, And so for this particular one, I wanted it to be a little bit like a train of thought with very little white space, very little breathing room, because it's almost like you're being convinced to do something that you're not so sure you want to do, but I guess I'll go along with it. So, okay, and so I kind of wanted to have that sort of rushed, being convinced to kind of jump off the cliff with the other lemmings kind of feeling to it. So, I mean, just in terms of craft and form, yeah, I mean, it's all one paragraph, which is very kind of chaotic, and it's hard to, breathe, I guess, when you're reading it. And so that was kind of the sense that I wanted it to have, was that it, just has this kind of,
yeah, I get what you're saying. Meredith, what do you think about that?
Well, first off, as soon as I saw it, I just thought, oh, this is just such an excellent piece of writing. And to me, the parallel that I saw for that kind of work being set was James Agee, the beginning of Knoxville, summer of 1915, just because it set a scene. It was like a scene setter for me, and Samuel Barber set that so perfectly, and I could just see it, and I felt very much like I was the young girl. In my mind, the mother might have been in the room or might not have. Like she was a hovering presence, mom, but it was almost as if the girl was looking at him and knew the mom would approve of this kind of person. And it felt like the speaker was so inexperienced financially, inexperienced just in the number of people she'd ever met in her life. And that little things like being well groomed or having a little logo on your neat shirt made you a nice, safe person with a whole bunch of assumptions, none of which were right, because of course it was the devil in disguise.
Yep.
And I felt so, I could see this girl in her house, and it seemed possibly like a threadbare couch. And I mean, again, I've spent a lot of time in a kind of a rural place, and I could see my grandmother's furniture, which, you know, wasn't fancy, but it was, well, I could see the upholstery. I could see the kind of room. I could see the kitchen out of the corner of my eye where the linoleum was. And it just kind of, I just envisioned it all suddenly when I read it, and I just thought it was amazing. And as I said to Frank, I thought this was going to be a really great long piece, and he had to be so surgical with how he took it to the strength of innocence and violation, and finding the words from the text that most got that across.
Yeah.
And
I think I had to cut quite a few. I did cut some words, Mary Heather. I hope you don't mind the ones I cut.
No, not at all.
felt that you did stay true to the feeling of the piece. But then when I heard the piano, like I think we've been in the pre-chat, we were talking, you mentioned the word flirtatious, which, you know, I'm a bit dire. I don't see the lighter side of things automatically. And I was really surprised when I got Frank's piece, because it was perky. And that was what it seemed to me at the beginning, just because I'm a terrible pianist. And so I was playing it. I was thinking, this is really perky. How do I do this? And my wonderful pianist, the minute he got it, because he is a great pianist, looked at it and went, oh, this is Girl from Ipanema. That was how he felt that seductive element of it. And I guess it would be Boy from Ipanema. But once I got that from him, everything that was in your original text somehow got a lot easier for me. I don't know why. And I just felt like by the time you get to the end, it's just so heartbreaking. There's a persistent sting to innocence lost, a trace of diesel in the air. It's so satanic, that brimstone that's left over, and the violation, and it just, so I just felt that it was an amazing woman's song, and also being a young girl's song that made it different too.
Yeah, let's play a clip here of
Young man sitting on your mother's flowered couch, polite and respectful, talking about your future security and the wealth of opportunities to come, though you barely know him. You are taken with his outsider accent, his breast polo shirt with the company logo over his heart, the way he folds his long fingers after hour, again and again, and the midnight light from the drill passes through your bedroom curtains, the clanging and pounding, invading the silence of your room.
The clanging and pounding invading the silence of your room. Mary Heather, how did you come up with that line? That's just the best line ever.
I just imagined what it's like to be next to a drill pad.
Yeah.
I mean, it is 24/7 noise and light, and it's very invasive.
His pressed polo shirt with the company logo over his heart. Oh, wow. You could just see, like, when I wrote that, and I'm just like, this is oozing. The great con is on here. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like that character is just so vivid that you created. But unfortunately, it's the real thing. You know, this is the typical type of thing. It's unbelievable. So now let's circle back to Wayne. So Wayne, you have the distinction, as we mentioned, of the only person, the only writer to have two songs, two different pieces on this album. And we were talking earlier about how, for me, Shift is somewhat related to Agland. But before we talk about that, just talk about again what motivated Shift for you and to compose this piece. Do you know this guy personally, this self-paleontologist?
Yeah, he was one of the first people I met my first year going out on a dig in, I think 2008 or so. He was an educator, kind of a guy who, like a jack of all trades kind of person, knew a lot about a lot of things and been around in the world of geology and paleontology and science in general, and had made some amazing discoveries, and really seemed like just an up and coming kind of guy. And you know, he took a bunch of us to this garage where he had his own like personal lab, and he developed this technique for making amazing casts of the fossils that we were finding by creating a framework of Legos that he would put the fossil inside of and then pour this resin into that would allow you to have this mold that you can then make as many copies of that fossil as you want and use that to give to museums or educational institutions and kids in classrooms, and just amazing stuff. And so when I went back in successive years and he wasn't there, and then finally one of the last times I was there, in I believe 2018 or so, saw him one last time, but he was not doing paleontology anymore. Now he was working one of the fracking rigs over in I believe it was Williston, and met us at the bar kind of one last time. And he was a changed person. You know, his marriage had kind of you know, that dried up. Personal life, you know, it was like I didn't even know him anymore. And I was actually surprised that you selected this poem. It was like a character sketch almost, and almost difficult to read. I usually wasn't reading this one very much early on when I would you know, go to open mics or be a feature. And when it was selected for the book and then selected for the album, it surprised me. But now thinking about what Meredith had said about how it really, you know, connects to the first poem in the context of the album, makes a lot more sense as to why it was selected and how it kind of bookends, I guess, our existence out there, you know, and how the bar plays a huge part of that, you know, where you kind of get together and talk about your day because you've been spending so much time alone out in the field, whether you're, working at fracking or just, doing paleontology. It's kind of lonely. You're out there from 9 a.m. till 4 or 5 o'clock at night. At least we were, and there's nobody around.
It's amazing.
So when you get back, you need to talk to people. And yeah.
Well, I think the thing about the poem that really resonated with me and was the fact that it was sort of like a tale of two cities, and it was just sort of like what I guess the project comes right down to, even though it's songs and things like that, is that we're telling stories. And this was a very particularly gripping story because the thing that really stood out to me was the fact that we had this highly intelligent, highly curious person who I always thought as being very passionate about life and about learning, and how the decisions that he felt like he had to make in his life to survive just absolutely sucked everything out of that. Yeah. And for me, that's one of the more poignant stories about what this industry is. And this, like we always talk about with Meredith, this is a thing about the environment, about the negative impacts that fracking does on the environment, but we're only talking about it because it makes a negative impact on us as humans, right? So, and it's those personal stories that I felt. I don't know, Meredith, what do you think? Like, do you agree with that, or?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's so important that we try to see this from lots of different viewpoints, because if we don't see the people around us, like, for example, Wayne, I have a very particular friend that I cast in the role of this guy, not simply because of the excitement and I always look at it. Okay, so I'm in a particular subset of classical music, which is like super nerdy and has a small audience and doesn't get paid like that well. And I love it. I love those people. They are my tribe. And so I have this understanding of the king of the nerds phenomenon, how amazing it is to see somebody who is so into their passion for this thing that might seem obscure to a lot of other people, right? And I just loved him right away. And if it hadn't even changed, I mean, Shift, obviously the title was a giveaway, right. But I was with him. And then what I wasn't sure of was how the two elements went hand in hand. Did his wife leave and his life fall apart, and therefore he said, I don't give a damn about anything anymore. I just need to pay alimony. And then he went to the oil fields. Or did he go to the oil fields to make everything great, but then was spending so much time away? Or maybe she just didn't agree with him doing that. Or it was like there was so many things that could have caused that shift in his character. But obviously it all turned on this change of utter and complete turn, almost like turning your back on who you were before.
Well, you can hear that in the music and how the music itself shifts in that song, and how you sing it changes. There's a jounce to it at the beginning, and you can hear the beat and the rhythm is more lively, and there's something to it, and then how it gets darker as the song goes.
Let's jump in there and just play a little clip for everyone to hear.
In the garage, at his lab, a bench of broken projects and rough drafts. The self-taught paleontologist shows how to make resin casts of dinosaur bones. He uses towers of Lego, framing a fossil within the bricks. Then pours silicone, viscid like melted cheese, down into the calm. 4 hours later, the
there we go. That's a clip from the ship. The first part before it gets darker later. Honestly, I never thought I would ever write a song where the last song or the last line of the song is in an open-faced grilled cheese sandwich, and how Meredith sings that so morosely. It's so awesome.
But Frank, weren't you kind of writing a little bit of I'm going to get super geeky now, but this is what this particular song does for me. Didn't you kind of incorporate the idea of Dido's lament in there?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So it is, because the famous words of Dido's Lament is one of the operas that's come down to us over 500 years. The famous lament is, remember me, but forget my fate. And I felt like that was him. You could remember him as he was, and you didn't want to remember his fate, sitting there looking at that grilled cheese sandwich and
Precisely.
brokenness. And I don't know, I felt like it was an amazing contrast.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
We've got a few minutes left, and I just to wrap it up, I just wanted to ask each of you about your thoughts about where the heck do you think we are with all this stuff? You know, I've been writing environmentally minded music for a long time, and I see a lot of people out there doing a lot of work. How do you all feel? Like, optimistic, pessimistic about our world moving forward, and how do you think what we do as artists help in all this stuff? Maybe Lilith, would you mind starting with that, or maybe sharing some of your thoughts? Anything you're thinking?
Well, I think it matters what we do as artists. It matters to us. I think it matters to others too, but I know it matters to us, and how we continue, how it allows us to raise our kids and be in community, and all these discussions about how to not make it simple and to understand other perspectives. If we're doing that, we're doing really important work. It doesn't shut down discussion. And I mean, where I am, the fracking craziness, especially the land speculation, has way scaled back. They're focusing on a few areas. They're trying to go deeper. They're trying to get to oil, but it's not as devastating anymore. It hasn't, like, it backed off, and the traffic's not crazy, and we can live here. And you know, there's something in everybody's backyard. But I always come back to Gary Snyder, who would talk about, we don't really know what's going to happen. Anything could happen. So that's, you know, from his Buddhist perspective, it's very, it's a good thing to keep in mind for me. All the science is great and important. We need to do our work, but we can't say what's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to maybe try to keep our sanity, right? And meanwhile, Mary Heather, you are, of course, a scientist and a writer and a poet and do so many different things. How do you sort of balance your artistic life and your scientific life of trying to keep a perspective of how our world is, what direction it's going in?
Yeah, I think, I guess, well, first of all, to sort of answer that first question, I would just echo Lilas's sentiment that it is important. I think one of the challenges that scientists have is, you know, conveying the urgency of something with data, right? Data doesn't get people's attention. Stories get people attention. Art gets people's attention, because that is, you know, what conveys the human condition, and that's what people care about. So I think it's really essential for there to be this collaboration between art and science to move people to action. I guess for me, it's been a while since I've been a practicing scientist. You know, it was kind of my former career before my kids. And to be honest, it was hard to be a young mother working in that field. It really triggered a lot of anxiety for me. And I couldn't, you know, drive past an industrial site with going, I know what's in the groundwater there. I know what's in the soil there. It's it can be crazy making at times. I think that I guess I would say I just kind of have this this, I don't know, optimism about people being able to rise to the occasion. I do think that people are infamous about waiting to the last minute and procrastinating until
Human nature.
something
is that.
forces us to do it, but
Mhm.
I do think possibilities exist. The thing that frustrates me here in Vermont is, I mean, we just had natural gas lines put in our community, and you know, I just find it so interesting that Vermonters who are so, you know, many who are so environmentally savvy and but when the cheap stuff comes our way, people will connect. And my husband and I absolutely refuse to, just because for me, it's a moral principle thing. But you know, it's I also come from a position of privilege where I have the ability to do that. So, you know, it's nuanced. But I do think I guess I feel like people there's definitely a lot of hope for people to be motivated by story and by art, and you know, projects just like this. You know, really underscoring it. People are going to be much more moved by this project than by looking at a graph or looking at a table of data. And I really do believe that our community, greater community, is motivated to bring attention to these things and insist on change eventually. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. That's really powerful to hear, you know, because yeah, we're sort of at this moment, and I can't agree enough. I'd rather hear Meredith sing than look at a graph. I'd rather have Meredith sing a graph, you know, describe the graph. But Wayne, you know, I was thinking about when Mary Heather was talking about her kids and stuff, and you know, and this kind of thing. I'm on it right away. I thought of you, that you know, again, you have so many different roles in life as a parent, but you're a high school science teacher, right? You're working with the kids. Like, how do you explain to your kids in your class like the road we're on and what they can do to make it better? Like, how do you motivate that?
Well, you know, and that's a great question, because I look at this through the lens of being a teacher. And, you know, I have my own daughter is at the high school where I teach, and I'm the environmental club advisor, and I recruited my own daughter to be the president of the club, and she recruits other kids to come and join us, and to, you know, we have all these projects going on, and it's fantastic. But what we have to remember is these kids are today growing up in a world where EVs are now commonplace. Solar power is on not just the rich people's roofs anymore, it's on everybody's roofs, really. You know, wind turbines are more common on the horizon than they were certainly when we were growing up. And we thought back then that the answer was nuclear power, you know, as the clean energy source. And I remember Long Island, and we were going to build a nuclear power plant, and that was very quickly canceled, because how do we evacuate Long Island? So these kids are growing up in a world where, you know, their baseline is EVs and solar power and wind power, and we didn't have any of that as our base when we were growing up. Certainly, I didn't. Right, I grew up in the 80s, early 90s. So there's hope, because, you know, 30 years from now, there's going to be a new baseline, and we have to hope that that's going to be better for the children of our current students who are living through this revolution, this energy revolution. And there's a reason why fracking is not what it was back in its height in 2012 and 2015 and 2018. It's too cheap. So there's less money in it now, and so there's alternatives, and they're more attractive, and hopefully they're better for the environment, and hopefully the students who are living through this now make improvements on what we've started.
Meredith, any thoughts on what you're hearing everyone saying?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, I still see that there's all these investments, at least in Canada, a lot of investments being made, I think, so short-sightedly to get like the last bits that are there out, and especially offshore, which really impacts me because I'm from an island province, and it's off our shore, and pretty horrible things have happened as a result of the offshore drilling rigs. And at the same time, I mean, I look at what's happening in AI, and I think to myself, okay, it could be just the world's worst nightmare, but also look at how fast it outstripped what the individual scientists that were the main ones working on it ever thought it would do.
Yeah.
And I thought, we've got this generation of people who have a different set of tools in their wiring and at their fingertips, because they are just from a different generation. And what can they do? What solutions can they find? Like, I don't want a blue sky and say, oh, the kids are going to fix it. My kids are not happy with us. They are pretty pissed with us. And just as well, the whole existential sadness that they feel every time I'm mostly a radio listener, so I don't have TV, but every time I've got the radio on, and it's this, that, extinction, coral, everything, everywhere. And it's so depressing. But at the same time, there's so much that we don't know that can happen. We are tinkerers, right? Humans are just tinkerers. We tinker. And every tiny little tinkering opens up all these other possibilities. So can we go back and retrofit ourselves out of our problems? I doubt it altogether, but there is hope, I think.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that. Honestly, when I asked the question to start just this last little bit, I was like, oh gosh, I'm not feeling hopeful sometimes. You know, I've got good days and bad days, depending what you hear in the news or, you know, things. But thanks to all of you, I do feel good. So I feel much better and optimistic. So I can't thank you enough, all of you, for joining us on this journey, for doing this lovely chat. I want to thank everybody who watched tonight live. This, of course, is available now in a recorded format, and people can ask questions and continue in comments where this will appear in news feeds and so forth. We're actually planning on doing 2 more of these panel discussions. So if anybody wants to join us live for next time, the next one on Tuesday, December the 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern, that will feature more writers whose work was featured on the album: Allison Hawthorne Deming, Susan Truxell Souter, and Rachel Morgan on Tuesday the 5th. On the evening of Monday, December the 11th, we'll have our 3rd and final Fractures panel discussion, which will feature 2 Michelles, Michelle Regolato Dietrich and Michelle Donahue, and finally Kathleen Burke. So thank you, all of you, so much for doing this. We work on these projects, these creative products. Meredith and I take your beautiful words and make it into something, something different. And to finally have a conversation with you after all this time, after living with beautiful, poignant words for all this time, it really is really close to my heart. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for instigating it, the care you took with everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. And this was a fantastic discussion. This really topped off everything that we've been working towards here, and that you've put together. It really is the right thing to do to discuss this.
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
such
so,
a pleasure.
fascinating.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it was great. We can have this technology to do this. We all in so many different places here in North America. And so to do this was really special. So thanks a lot, everyone.